At 9:42 that Saturday night, my husband Evan Calder stood in a private hallway behind his sister's wedding ballroom, while a hotel event director ran his card for the final $38,000 balance. It declined once. Then it declined again. Behind those doors, his mother was smiling in a sage designer gown, the same woman who had told guests I was useful in private, but not presentable in public. What none of them knew was that I was Sloane Merritt, the wife they had hidden in Brooklyn with a fake story about a sick mother, and the account they planned to use for that perfect Charleston wedding was mine. By the time Evan opened his banking app and saw $14.82, I was already at JFK with my passport, my wedding ring gone, and $86,000 back where it belonged. Chapter 1. The final payment was a Evan Calder's card, was declined at 9:42 on a Saturday night, in the private hallway behind the ballroom of the Charleston Grand Harbor Hotel. I did not see his face in that moment. I did not hear the music still playing behind the double doors, or the laughter of the guests, who had no idea the perfect wedding was beginning to crack open where no one could photograph it. I only learned the details later, from paperwork, from a lawyer, and from the kind of people who cannot resist retelling a rich family's humiliation once the champagne stops flowing. But I can picture him clearly, even, 39, in the navy suit he had bought 2 weeks earlier and told me was for a regional sales dinner, standing too straight in front of Renee Talbot, the event director, while she held a payment tablet between them with the calm expression of someone who had seen panic dressed up as confidence before. Behind him, through the wall, his sister Marina Calder was still dancing with Nolan Pierce under white flowers and gold light, having the Charleston wedding Vivian Calder had spent months pretending her family could afford. Renee kept her voice low and professional. There was a remaining balance, she explained, and the contract required it to be handled before the reception closed. Evan smiled the way he smiled at sales meetings, all charm and certainty, and handed her his card, declined. He gave a small laugh and said it was probably a fraud alert. Renee tried again, declined. That was when Vivian, his mother, stepped closer. She was wearing a sage designer gown and a sapphire gold necklace she had chosen because it looked old money from across a ballroom. Her face, I was told, went still in that awful way Southern women go still when rage has to pass through manners first. Evan, what is happening? Evan opened his banking app. Whatever he saw made the color leave his face. Vivian took the phone from his hand, looked at the screen, and her voice rose just enough for the hallway to hear. Where is the money? That morning began in our apartment in Park Slope, Brooklyn, with coffee cooling on the counter, and Evan standing in the kitchen doorway like a man about to deliver terrible news. I was 36 then. My name was Sloane Merritt, and I had been married to Evan Calder for a little more than 7 years. We married in June of 2018, back when I still believed love meant building a life with someone, not slowly becoming the structure that held up his. I worked as a senior travel operations manager for North Atlantic retreats. My job was to make complicated things look effortless. Corporate retreats, hotel blocks, vendor contracts, emergency rebookings, weather delays, executives stranded in Denver, a keynote speaker's passport missing in Miami. I lived by schedules, confirmation numbers, budgets, and contingency plans. I knew how to fix a crisis. What I did not know, not yet, was that I had been sleeping beside one. Evan came into the kitchen with one hand pressed to the back of his neck. He looked pale, but not in a sick way. More like a man trying to remember the lines of a speech he had rehearsed in the shower. Mom had a hypertensive crisis last night, he said. I need to get to Charleston. I set my mug down so fast coffee splashed over my thumb. Is she in the hospital? No, he said too quickly. She refused. You know, Mom. The doctor came to the house. He wants her resting. No visitors. No stress. His mother, Vivian Calder, had never been fond of doctors unless she could name drop them at charity luncheons, so that part sounded possible. Still, something in Evan's voice had a seam in it. I'll come with you, I said. I can pack in 10 minutes. He shook his head before I had even finished. No, Sloane. It'll be too much. The house is already full. Warren's there, Marina's there, relatives are coming in and out. Mom doesn't want a crowd. I'm not a crowd, Evan. I'm your wife. He looked away, I know. But she's embarrassed when she's weak. You staying here is better. Keep your work stable. I'll update you. That was the first bell. Not loud, not dramatic, but clear enough. What's the doctor's name? I asked. He blinked. The local doctor. I don't remember his name. Dad handled it. Is she on medication? Should I call the pharmacy and see if anything needs picking up? No, they have it covered. Can I FaceTime her for 10 seconds? Just to tell her I'm thinking of her? She's sleeping. She took something. I don't want to wake her. Every answer closed a door. None of them opened one. I wanted to ask him why he was packing his good dress shoes if his mother was supposedly bedridden. I wanted to ask why he had trimmed his beard that morning before telling me the news. But I had learned, over years with the Calders, that asking the wrong question too directly gave them a chance to make the question the problem. So I nodded. I helped him pack. I folded shirts while he checked his phone every 30 seconds. I watched him place a navy suit jacket into the garment bag, then remove it when he saw me looking. "Sales dinner next week," he muttered. "I might as well drop it at the cleaner down there." Down there, Charleston. His family's kingdom of polished silver, old grudges, and women who could insult you with a compliment so soft you almost thank them. Vivian Calder was 64, former chairwoman of the Charleston Women's Heritage Guild, and the kind of woman who believed family reputation was not just important, but holy. She had never told me she hated me. Vivian was too well trained for that. She called me Brooklyn practical, hardworking, sweet enough. Once, at Thanksgiving, she told a guest I had a very useful mind, as if I were a kitchen appliance. Marina, Evan's younger sister, was 32 and exactly the kind of daughter Vivian knew how to display. She was an interior stylist, a small lifestyle influencer, and the bride-to-be of Nolan Pierce, a junior partner in commercial real estate. The Pierces had the kind of Charleston name Vivian respected, not because they were kind, but because other people recognized it. For months, Vivian had talked about Marina's wedding, like it was a restoration project for the Calder family name. Every flower, every table linen, every guest mattered. I had not heard much lately, but I assumed that was because I was not part of the planning. That assumption would turn out to be almost true. Evan kissed my forehead before he left. It was the kind of kiss men give when they want the scene to end. "I'll call when I get there," he said. "Please do. And Sloane, don't worry about Mom. She just needs quiet." He said quiet like he was asking me to become it. After the door closed, the apartment felt too still. I cleaned because that is what I do when I am trying not to panic. I wiped the counter, rinsed the mugs, put his abandoned coffee in the sink. Then I noticed his denim jacket hanging over the back of the dining chair. He had meant to take it. Evan always stuffed receipts into his jacket pockets, then complained when he could not find them. I picked it up to hang it by the door. A piece of paper slipped from the inside pocket and fell face up onto the floor. At first, I only saw the letterhead, Wexler Coastal Catering. I stood there for a second, not bending. My mind tried to find a version of the world where catering had something to do with blood pressure. Then I picked it up. The paper was wrinkled, folded twice, with a coffee stain on one corner. But the important parts were clear. Charleston Grand Harbor Hotel. Wedding package. Marina Calder and Nolan Pierce. Total package, $77,480. Final 50% balance, $38,740. Due October 18, 2025, before reception close. Contact and signing party, Evan Calder. I read it once, then again, then a third time, slower, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something merciful. Vivian was not sick. Evan was not racing home for an emergency. He was going to his sister's wedding. A wedding at a luxury hotel. A wedding with catering expensive enough to be a down payment on someone's life. A wedding I had not been told about. My first feeling was not anger. It was a strange, clean silence, like my body had stepped out of the room and left my mind alone with the facts. Marina Calder and Nolan Pierce. October 18, 2025. Evan Calder, before reception close. I thought of the checking account that carried my paychecks, my bonuses, my emergency savings. The account in my name. Evan had been an authorized user since 2019. Back when letting him help with bills had felt like trust instead of access. Over the last few months, I had seen charges I did not recognize. Hotel holds, floral deposits, family travel expenses, Evan had said. Charleston stuff, Mom's health. Don't worry. I had worried. Just not enough. I placed the receipt on the table and took a photo of it, then another. I saved them into a folder on my laptop and named it Evan Charleston. I did not call him screaming. I did not text Marina. I did not call Vivian and ask why I had been erased from a family event while my husband signed the payment papers. There are moments when anger is too loud to be useful. This was one of them. I opened my laptop and searched Marina Calder. Her Instagram was private. Of course it was. Marina loved attention, but only the kind she could curate. I searched Nolan Pierce, then Margot Pierce, his mother, Blair Pierce, his sister, Delia Calder, Evan's younger cousin who posted every meal, every centerpiece, every glass of champagne before she drank it. Before I could click, my phone rang even. I let it ring twice, then answered. "Hey," he said. His voice had that soft, tired edge people use when they are lying from a comfortable chair. "How is Vivian?" "Resting. Doctor said she needs quiet. We're all just trying not to overwhelm her." I looked at the catering receipt. What's the doctor's name, Evan? I want to send flowers and maybe ask if there's anything she needs. A pause, I don't know. Dad talked to him, then give me the clinic name. Another pause, longer this time. The reception is bad here. Sloane, reception. He actually said that word while a wedding receipt sat in front of me. Even, are you still there? Yeah, I'll call you back. Mom's asleep. I don't want to wake anybody. The call ended. 10 seconds later, a text appeared. Bad reception. Don't worry about Mom. I stared at those words until they blurred. Bad reception. Don't worry about Mom. On the table, Wexler Coastal Catering told a different story. One with dates, signatures, and a $38,000 balance waiting at the end of the night. I did not know yet what else I would find. I did not know about the videos, or the sentence Vivian would say with a smile, or the way Evan would stand close enough to hear it and still choose silence. All I knew was that my husband had lied badly, and the lie had paperwork. I opened the search bar again and typed Delia Calder. Then Blair Pierce. Then Margot Pierce. If Evan was not brave enough to tell me why I had been left out, I would let the internet do what cowards always forget it does. I would let it tell the truth. Chapter 2. She called me the woman. Who would embarrass the Marina's page gave me nothing but a locked profile picture. A soft focus image of her laughing under Spanish moss. The kind of photo Vivian would have approved because it looked effortless and expensive at the same time. So I moved outward. Nolan Pierce's profile was public enough to show engagement photos, golf weekends, and a rehearsal dinner toast from the night before. Margot Pierce's page was mostly garden club luncheons and charity auctions. Blair Pierce posted less, but when she did, it was polished, curated, and full of people who knew exactly where to stand when someone lifted a phone. Then I found Delia Calder. Delia was 27, Evan's younger cousin, and the kind of person who documented everything before deciding whether it was appropriate to post. Her Instagram stories were a string of Charleston sunshine, champagne flutes, monogrammed napkins, and white flowers spilling over tables at the Charleston Grand Harbor Hotel. The first story I opened showed a gold-printed menu. Marina and Nolan, October 18, 2025. I stared at the screen for so long that the edges of the phone dug into my palm. There it was. Not a family emergency. Not a sick mother resting in a dark bedroom. A wedding. A real wedding, with orchids and lilies and a menu that probably cost more than my first car payment. Delia's next story loaded before I was ready. The camera swept across the ballroom, shaky and excited, catching white roses, tall candles, a string quartet near the far wall, and then Vivian Calder. She was not in bed. She was not pale. She was not recovering from a hypertensive crisis. She stood in the center of the frame, wearing a sage designer gown that shimmered when she turned. Her hair was set in soft waves, her makeup was perfect, and a sapphire gold necklace rested against her throat like proof of a life she wanted everyone to believe had always been hers. She was smiling. Not the brave smile of a woman pushing through illness, the satisfied smile of a woman who had gotten exactly the room she wanted. I replayed the clip, and this time I saw him. Evan stood near the bar in the background, wearing the navy suit he had pulled from his garment bag that morning. He lifted a glass toward Nolan Pierce, laughed at something I could not hear, then leaned in as if he belonged to that night completely. That laugh hurt more than the receipt. A lie can still leave room for misunderstanding. A laugh does not. He was not trapped. He was not torn. He was not sitting beside his mother's bed, worried and exhausted. He was at his sister's wedding, dressed like a proud brother, smiling inside a life where I had been quietly removed. Another story appeared, this one from Blair Pierce. It caught Margot Pierce standing beside Vivian near a floral arch. "I don't think I've met Evan's wife tonight," Margot said, her voice light, curious, polite. Vivian's smile did not move, but something behind it sharpened. "Oh, Sloane couldn't make it," she said. That was all. No explanation, no sickness, no emergency, just a tiny verbal eraser dragged across my name. I sat back from the table. I had not been forgotten. That would have hurt, but forgetting is human. This was planned. My absence had been considered, managed, explained just enough to keep the evening smooth. Then Delia shared a short clip from Blair's private circle, probably because she thought it was funny, or glamorous, or harmless. The video started near the bar. Vivian stood with a woman I did not know, both holding champagne. The woman asked, "So where is Evan's wife?" Vivian gave a small laugh, the kind she used before saying something unforgivable in a voice soft enough to pass for manners. "Honestly, it's better this way. Sloane would make the Calder family look like we married beneath ourselves." My chest tightened so fast I had to put the phone down. The clip kept playing. "She's useful in private," Vivian added, "but not presentable in public. There are sentences that do not sound loud when they enter a room, but they destroy something anyway." I picked up the phone and played it again, then again. I was not trying to punish myself. I was making sure I had heard her correctly. I needed to know that the woman I had spent 7 years trying to please had truly reduced me to usefulness. Not family. Not daughter-in-law. Not even Evan's wife in any meaningful sense, useful in private, not presentable in public. I remembered Vivian standing behind me before a Thanksgiving dinner, touching the sleeve of my dress and saying, "Maybe something softer next time, dear." I remembered Marina laughing when I explained my work at North Atlantic retreats and saying, "So you book trips for tired executives." I remembered Evan squeezing my knee under tables after his mother made little comments whispering, "Don't take it personally. Mom just has standards." Standards. That was what he called it when his mother trimmed pieces off me and expected me to thank her for the shaping. In the edge of the video, Evan appeared again. He was close enough to hear, close enough to turn, close enough to say, "That is my wife." He did not. He looked down into his champagne, smiled at something Nolan said, and turned away. That was the moment I stopped protecting him in my own mind. Until then, some part of me had still wanted to believe Evan had been pressured, that he had been embarrassed, manipulated, cornered by Vivian's expectations. But no one had covered his mouth, no one had tied his hands. He had heard his mother make me small, and he had chosen the comfort of silence. My phone shook in my hand when I called Tamsin Vale. She answered on the second ring. "Tell me you're okay." "I'm not," I said. My voice sounded calm in a way that frightened me. Evan lied. Vivian isn't sick. Marina's wedding is tonight at the Charleston Grand Harbor. He's there. Vivian just said I'd make the Calder family look like they married beneath themselves. There was a pause, then Tamsin said, "Do not call him again." I found a catering receipt. Evan signed for the final payment. Good. Photograph everything. Screenshot everything. Save the videos. Keep timestamps. And Sloane, the checking account he uses, that's in your name, right? Yes, he's an authorized user. Not a joint owner. Then you need advice before you touch anything. I'm calling Harper Bloom Tamsin. No, she said. Firm but gentle. Listen to me. You are hurt, and you have every right to be. But don't hand them one angry text they can wave around later and call you unstable. I looked at the frozen image of Vivian on my phone, champagne in hand, smile perfect. I want to go there, I admitted. I want to walk into that ballroom and play the clip on the loudest speaker they have. And then Vivian gets exactly what she wants, Tamsin said. A scene. A dramatic wife. A reason. Don't give her your dignity as a wedding favor. I closed my eyes. She was right. I had been in enough rooms with Vivian to know how quickly she could turn a wound into evidence against the person bleeding. If I stormed into that wedding, she would not be exposed. She would be vindicated. "See," she would say with that sorrowful little shake of her head. "This is why we did not invite her." "I don't want to be the woman they wrote for me," I said. "Then don't be," Tamsin said. "Be quiet, be exact, be documented." 15 minutes later, Harper Bloom joined the call. Her voice was steady, professional, and unsentimental in the way I suddenly needed. "Tamsin gave me the short version," Harper said. "I'm going to ask you a few practical questions. Is the account solely in your name?" "Yes." "Is Evan a joint owner or an authorized user?" "Authorized user." "Do you have proof he misrepresented the reason for the charges?" "I have the catering receipt in his name, his text saying his mother was sick, and video showing his mother at the wedding." "Do not threaten him," Harper said. "Do not argue in writing. Preserve records. Protect your personal account. Don't touch anything solely in his name. Document every dollar. I'll send you a checklist, and we can schedule a formal consultation." There was no dramatic promise of revenge. No courtroom speech. Just instructions. And somehow that made me feel steadier. After the call ended, I walked into our bedroom. The framed wedding photo still sat on the dresser. Evan and I were smiling in front of June hydrangeas. Vivian standing behind us in pale blue, her hand resting lightly on Evan's shoulder. In that picture, I used to think she looked proud. Now I understood. She had never accepted me. She had tolerated me while I was convenient. I cried then, but not loudly. Not the kind of crying people imagine when betrayal happens. It was quiet, almost private from myself. I cried because I had spent 7 years trying to become easier to love by people who only wanted me useful. I cried because my husband had watched them make me invisible and had helped hold the curtain. Then I wiped my face. I went back to my laptop, but I did not open Instagram again. I opened an old folder buried deep in my files. Rome Someday. I had made it in 2016, before Evan, before the Calders, before I learned how many dreams a woman can postpone and still call herself practical. Inside were saved photos of Trastevere, Pinchin Hill, Piazza del Popolo, tiny cafes with red awnings, walking routes I had built for a version of myself I had almost forgotten. Even had laughed once when he found it. Rome is for people without real bills, he had said. I opened my desk drawer and took out my passport. It was valid until 2028. For the first time in years, I did not ask myself what Evan would think, or what Vivian would say, or whether leaving would make me look dramatic. I opened a flight search, and I chose myself before anyone could talk me out of it. Chapter 3. I stopped paying for their Lee Harper's checklist arrived in my inbox, while the flight search page was still glowing on my screen. There was nothing emotional about it. No dramatic language. No promise that I would win. No comforting sentence about karma or betrayal. It was only a short, practical list, the kind of list a woman sends when she knows another woman is standing at the edge of something and needs facts more than sympathy. Protect your personal account. Preserve records. Do not touch assets solely in his name. Download statements. Remove authorized access if the account is yours. Do not communicate in anger. I read it twice, then placed my phone beside the Wexler Coastal Catering receipt on the dining table. For a moment, the apartment was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum. Outside, Park Slope moved through a normal Saturday afternoon. A stroller rolled over the sidewalk. Someone laughed near the brownstone steps. A dog barked once, then stopped. Ordinary life kept going, which felt almost offensive. I opened my banking portal and started downloading statements. 6 months. That was what Harper had told me to preserve first. 6 months of charges, transfers, holds, memos, and automatic payments. At first, they looked like the same dull financial language every marriage runs on. Utilities, groceries, insurance, rent. Then I started sorting by merchant name, date, and amount. The pattern appeared slowly, then all at once. A florist deposit in Charleston, which Evan had told me was a family medical expense because Vivian needed help keeping her house presentable while she recovered. A hotel block at Charleston Grand Harbor, which he had called a travel hold for relatives coming in to help with his mother. A bridal suite charge under a vendor name I had not recognized. A tux rental. A rehearsal dinner hold. A payment to Wexler Coastal Catering. And one charge labeled Vivian Gift Balance. Dated the same week, Vivian had posted a close-up of a sapphire gold necklace on her private society page with a caption about family heirlooms and meaningful traditions. I stared at that one for a long time. It had not been an heirloom. It had been another performance, and part of the money that held the performance upright had come from my account, not our account. Mine, the checking account, was in my name. My salary from North Atlantic retreats went into it. My bonuses went into it. My emergency savings sat there because I had once believed a healthy marriage meant transparency and convenience. Evan had been an authorized user since 2019. After he convinced me it would make household bills easier. At the time, it had felt like trust. Now it looked like access. I saved every statement as a PDF. I renamed each file with the date. I took screenshots of every charge tied to Charleston. I put them in the folder with the receipt and the videos. I was not crying anymore. I was working. That was something I understood. When a keynote speaker missed a flight, I did not fall apart. I rerouted. When a hotel overbooked 20 executives, I found another property. When a storm closed an airport, I built a new schedule. Panic was a luxury my job had trained out of me. So I treated my marriage like a crisis file. Then I remembered the old iPad in the desk drawer. Evan and I had used it for recipes, streaming, travel maps, whatever device happened to be closest. His messages had synced there before, though he always forgot. I pulled it out, charged it, and watched the screen come back to life. There were old threads, mostly boring, mostly harmless. Then I found Vivian. My thumb stopped. The messages were not long, but they did not need to be. Are you sure she won't notice? That was Vivian. Evan had answered. Sloane never checks until month end. I'll cover it before then. Then Vivian. Good. Marina deserves a day without embarrassment. I sat very still. There it was. Not misunderstanding. Not pressure. Not Evan being careless. Vivian knew. Evan knew. Marina's wedding was not just happening without me. It was being funded in pieces by the woman they had decided would embarrass them if she appeared in the photographs. I took screenshots. I emailed them to myself. I saved them to the folder. I sent a copy to Tamsin with no explanation. She called immediately. Sloane, she said, and I could hear traffic behind her, like she had stepped out onto a Brooklyn sidewalk. Tell me you saved those. I did. Do not respond to him if he contacts you. He hasn't. He will. I looked around the apartment. Evan's coffee mug was still in the sink. His old sneakers were by the door. His life was everywhere, casual and confident, because he had left that morning believing I would be exactly where he put me. I'm calling the bank, I said. Tamsin's voice softened. Do it clean. Do exactly what Harper said. I am. The bank representative asked me security questions in a cheerful voice that belonged to a different universe. My mother's maiden name. Last 4 digits. Recent deposit amount. I answered each one with a steadiness I did not feel. I'd like to remove an authorized user from my checking account and associated debit card, I said. Is the authorized user your spouse? Yes. Is this due to fraud or unauthorized activity? I paused. Harper's warning sat in my mind. Be careful, be precise. I am in the process of a marital separation, I said. The account is solely in my name, and I need to protect access to my personal funds. I would also like confirmation by email. The woman's voice became gentler, but still professional. I can help with that. She closed Evan's access, canceled the card attached to him, reset the online permissions, walked me through password changes and 2-factor authentication. When the confirmation email came through, I saved that too. Then I moved the money, $86,920. It was not a random number. It was not revenge math. It was my salary, my bonus, my savings, my emergency fund. The money I had built through early flights, late nights, last-minute client disasters, and years of telling myself that being practical was the same thing as being safe. I transferred it to the personal account I had opened before I married Evan. I did not touch his separate account. I did not touch his credit card. I did not touch his car payment, his retirement, or anything solely in his name. I did not call the hotel. I did not call Wexler Coastal Catering. I did not send Vivian's video to the Pierces. I did not try to stop the wedding. I simply stopped paying for the lie. After the transfer, I sat back and looked at the screen. Some pending charges were still clearing. The old checking account would not be empty. It would have what was left after Evan's choices, and my withdrawal of my own funds finished speaking to each other. Later, I would learn that number was $14.82. At that moment, I only knew I had taken back the part of my life that had been feeding people who were ashamed of me. I whispered it out loud because I needed to hear it in my own voice. I'm not destroying them. I'm just done funding who they pretend to be. Tamsin arrived 30 minutes later with a canvas tote, a phone charger, and the expression of someone who had decided to be useful instead of dramatic. Tell me what matters, she said. I pointed to the bedroom. Passport, birth certificate, tax records, employment contract, bank statements, hard drive, laptop. The photo of my parents on the dresser, and the folder labeled Rome someday. Tamsin nodded like we were packing for a work trip, not the end of a marriage. We moved quietly. That quiet became important. It kept me from turning pain into performance. I packed clothes that felt like mine, not the versions Vivian preferred. A black sweater, jeans, a wool coat, a navy dress I had bought for myself, and never worn because Evan once said it looked too serious. I left the jewelry Evan had given me in its velvet boxes. They looked expensive and meaningless. Then I stood in front of the dresser. My wedding photo faced the room, Evan and I smiling. Vivian behind us, hand on his shoulder, already claiming him from inside the frame. I took off my wedding ring. For 7 years, I had worn that circle like proof that I belonged somewhere. Now it felt like a small, polished reminder of how long I had stayed in a place where belonging was conditional. I placed it beside the frame and turned the photo face down. I did not write Evan a note. Notes invite replies. I was finished asking him to understand. In the living room, I opened my work laptop and sent an emergency personal leave request to North Atlantic Retreats. I attached the files Priya Nand would need, updated vendor notes, and left a clean handoff. Priya was my assistant operations coordinator, sharp, calm under pressure, the kind of woman I had been quietly mentoring for 2 years. I wrote, "Everything urgent is in the shared drive. You know more than you think you do." Then I closed the laptop. That small act made something settle in me. Even while my personal life collapsed, I had not collapsed with it. I was still the woman who knew how to leave things in order. The flight to Rome left from JFK Terminal 4 that night. I booked it with hands that shook only after the confirmation page appeared. Rome was not random. Rome was the dream I had folded away in 2016. Before Evan, before Vivian, before all those polite rooms where I learned to make myself smaller. My passport was valid until 2028. I had miles, savings, and a folder full of maps I had once made for a self I nearly abandoned. At JFK, with my suitcase beside me and the terminal lights reflected in the windows, I took one photo, my passport, my boarding pass, the handle of my suitcase. I posted it to my story with 4 words. One-way ticket, new chapter. I did not tag Evan. I did not mention Marina. I did not post Vivian's clip. I did not explain myself to people who had already decided I was easier to use than respect. Minutes later, Tamsin texted me. Key? Under the planter. If Evan comes home, don't let him rewrite this. Her reply came fast. I've got you. In Charleston, though I did not know it yet, Delia Calder saw my story from inside the reception. She showed Blair Pierce. Blair showed Margot. And somewhere between the champagne and the white flowers, a A question began moving quietly through the room. If Evan's wife was at JFK with a one-way ticket, why had Vivian told everyone I simply could not make it? At the same time, Renee Talbot was checking the hour. Glenn Wexler was asking whether the final payment had cleared. The reception was still glowing, still pretending, still held together by music and manners. My boarding group was called. I turned my phone to airplane mode as the plane began to roll away from the gate. I left New York without raising my voice. And in Charleston, Renee Talbot stepped into the ballroom to find my husband and ask him about $38,740. Chapter 4. The ballroom heard. The number of the ballroom was still glowing when Renee found him. I learned later that Marina and Nolan were near the dance floor, accepting congratulations beneath white flowers and gold light, while Vivian moved from table to table like she had personally invented elegance. Every napkin, every candle, every imported bloom had been chosen to make the night look effortless. That was Vivian's gift, making strain look like tradition and debt look like taste. The problem was that taste still had a balance due. Renee Talbot approached Evan with the kind of calm that makes panic feel even more exposed. She did not embarrass him in front of the guests. She did not raise her voice. She only touched his elbow lightly and said, "Mr. Calder, may I speak with you for a moment?" Evan looked annoyed at first. I can imagine that clearly. He had spent the night pretending to be the son of a respectable family, the brother of a beautiful bride, the man who could handle things. Being pulled away by staff did not fit the picture. Vivian saw it happen and followed. She never trusted anyone else to manage appearances. Especially not Evan, who had inherited her pride but not her discipline. Renee led them into a private event office off the back hallway. Glenn Wexler was already there, the owner of Wexler Coastal Catering, sleeves rolled neatly at the wrist, his expression controlled but tired. His team had fed the cocktail hour, the plated dinner, and most of the reception. Dessert and coffee service were waiting on confirmation. Renee placed a payment tablet on the desk. "The remaining balance is $38,740, she said. "As stated in the addendum, it's due before the reception closes." Evan gave the same easy smile he gave clients when he wanted them to stop reading the fine print. "Of course," he said. "Let's take care of it." He tapped his card, declined. The room went quiet in that sharp, ugly way only money can make a room go quiet. Even laughed once too lightly. "Probably a fraud alert." Rennie nodded without smiling and ran it again, declined. Glenn did not step forward aggressively. Men like him did not need to. He simply folded his hands and said, "My staff has completed service under contract, Mr. Calder. Food, labor, rentals, imported floral handling, all of it was scheduled based on the signed agreement. We do need the balance resolved tonight." Vivian's voice came low and tight. "Evan, fix it." He took out his phone. At first, the banking app refused the quick login. He tried again. His thumb shook enough that Face ID failed twice. Then he used the saved backup login, the one he must have thought would always be there because I had always been there. The screen opened, $14.82. That was the number that stared back at him. Not $38,000. Not enough to stall with a partial payment. Not even enough to buy 2 drinks in the hotel bar. $14.82. Vivian leaned toward him. "What does it say?" Evan did not answer. She snatched the phone from his hand, and for once, manners abandoned her before strategy could catch up. Her eyes moved from the balance to the notification below it. "Authorized user access removed." "What did you do?" she whispered, even swallowed. It was Sloane's account. Vivian's head turned slowly. It was family money. That was when Evan said the first honest sentence he had probably spoken all day. "No, Mom." It was her paycheck. Rennie looked down, not because she was embarrassed, but because professionals know when they are standing too close to a private collapse. Glenn's face hardened a little. He was not watching a card issue anymore. He was watching a family discover that the woman they had excluded was the one holding up the evening they were using to exclude her. Margot Pierce arrived at the doorway before Vivian could rebuild her face. She had come looking for Vivian because Marina was asking where her mother had gone. Margot was dressed in pale blue, pearls at her throat, her expression trained by years of polite Southern suspicion. "Is there a problem?" she asked. Renee answered carefully. "There's an issue with the final balance." Margot stepped in far enough to see the addendum on the desk. Her eyes found Evan's name. "Why is Evan paying for my son's wedding reception?" Vivian smiled, but it was thin enough to break. "It's just a family arrangement." Margot did not blink. "Then perhaps you can explain another family arrangement. Why did you tell everyone Evan's wife couldn't make it when Blair just showed me she's at JFK with a one-way ticket?" That was the moment Vivian lost the story, not the money. Not the card. The story. because the thing about people like Vivian is that they can survive almost any sin if they get to narrate it first. But Margot had walked in holding a question Vivian had not prepared to answer. Marina appeared behind her mother a moment later, eyes wide, dress perfect, face already beginning to crumble. Nolan stood behind her, looking not angry yet, just stunned. He looked at Marina and asked, "Did you know Sloane wasn't invited?" Marina opened her mouth, then closed it. Her silence was cleaner than a confession. Blair stood behind Margot, arms folded, watching Vivian with the cold interest of someone who had just realized she had married her brother into a lie. Delia hovered near the hallway, phone clutched in both hands, probably understanding for the first time that a story can be a match in a room full of gasoline. Renee brought the conversation back to paper because paper was safer than emotion. "The hotel can continue service," she said, "but we need a signed promissory note and a confirmed payment plan within 48 hours. Gullen nodded. "And catering requires the same. We've completed the contracted work." Vivian pulled out her own card. "Run mine." Rennie did. It did not clear the amount. Vivian tried another. Still not enough. Warren Calder was called in after that. I was told he arrived red-faced and irritated, as if he expected to scold the staff for bothering his family during a wedding. Then he saw the contract, saw Evan's name, saw Vivian's face, and understood something bigger had gone wrong. "You signed a wedding bill with your wife's money after lying to her?" Warren asked. Evan said nothing. He did not need to. Warren looked at Vivian next, and whatever passed between them had probably been building for 30 years. Vivian reached for the sapphire gold necklace at her throat. That necklace had glowed in Delia's videos like an heirloom. Later, I would learn it was not an heirloom at all. It was another purchase dressed as tradition, another prop in Vivian's museum of herself. She unclasped it with stiff fingers. For Vivian, being seen without it in that room was worse than being shouted at. Her bare neck told the truth before anyone else could. Renee did not simply take it. She was too careful for that. "We can document it as temporary collateral pending wire transfer," she said, "with identification and signatures." Glenn agreed to the same condition for his side of the balance, so Vivian signed. Evan signed. Warren signed. The necklace was photographed, described, and placed in an envelope like evidence. No one made an announcement in the ballroom. No one needed to. Scandal travels better when it is whispered. Marina returned with red eyes. Nolan did not take her hand. Margot sat down with the chilled posture of a woman revising an entire family in her mind. Blair whispered to a bridesmaid. Delia deleted something from her phone too late to matter. By the time dessert reached the tables, the version of the story moving through the room had already found its shape. Evan's card was declined. His wife was at JFK. Sloane paid for the wedding she was not invited to. The words became cleaner each time they passed from mouth to mouth. Evan tried calling me from his phone. Blocked. He tried from Warren's phone. I did not answer. He sent an email. I did not see it until much later, and even then, I did not open it. Somewhere over the Atlantic, I was unreachable in the only way that mattered. In that hallway, I think Evan finally understood what he had done. Not fully. Men like Evan rarely understand all at once, but enough. He remembered what Vivian had said about me near the bar. He remembered standing close enough to hear it. He remembered choosing silence because silence was easier than defending me. And then he looked at a screen that said $14.82, and he realized the card had not ruined the wedding. The card had only revealed what the wedding had been built on. Vivian sat in the private event office with her necklace gone and her signature on a promise to pay. Evan stood beside her, phone in hand, staring at the balance he could not explain away. Warren looked at his son as if he was seeing him clearly for the first time. And I was above the Atlantic, my hand bare, my passport under my palm, my phone on airplane mode, not knowing every detail yet, but knowing this. I had not crashed their perfect night. I had simply stopped holding it up. Chapter 5. I didn't come back to be Sinivan, went back to Park Slope after the wedding with the kind of hope only guilty people carry. The hope that if they arrive fast enough, the damage will still be waiting for them in a form they can control. But I was not there. He opened the apartment door and found quiet. Not the messy quiet after a fight. Not drawers thrown open, glass broken, clothes pulled from hangers in a rage. Everything was clean, intentional, almost gentle. That, I think, was what frightened him first. My side of the closet was not empty, not completely. I had left the dresses Vivian liked, the shoes Evan had bought, the jewelry that looked expensive and felt like a costume. What was missing told the truth better than a note could have. My laptop was gone. My passport was gone. My birth certificate, tax records, bank statements, hard drive, employment contract, the photo of my parents from the beach in Maine, all gone. On the dresser, My wedding ring sat beside the framed wedding photo I had turned face down. Evan called my name in the apartment, once from the hallway, once from the bedroom, once from the kitchen. There was no answer. Tamsin had already been there. She had taken the key from under the planter, photographed the apartment, and documented exactly what I had left and what I had taken. She did it because she knew Evan. She knew men like him often remembered women as unstable once those women stopped being useful. 2 days later, Evan received a notice from Harper Bloom. All communication with me would go through counsel. 1 week after that, the divorce filing landed. Harper did not need to dramatize anything. The evidence did what anger never could. The Wexler Coastal Catering receipt. The contract addendum with Evan's name on it. Bank statements. Proof that Evan had only been an authorized user on my account. His messages with Vivian. Vivian's video. His text about bad reception. The bank confirmation that I had revoked access to my personal funds. Paper has a strange kind of mercy. It does not sob. It does not explain too much. It simply remains. The divorce itself was not instant, and Harper never pretended it would be. Everything moved through attorneys, filings, responses, and deadlines. I did not need a dramatic courtroom victory to know I had already done the most important thing. I had protected my records, protected my account, and stopped giving Evan direct access to the life he had been using without respecting. Charleston handled the rest in its own quiet, merciless way. The Grand Harbor and Wexler Coastal Catering enforced the promissory note. Warren Calder had to pull from retirement liquidity to keep the debt from becoming uglier. Vivian sold the sapphire gold necklace and stepped down from one of her charity committees after too many women asked, with perfect sweetness, whether she was holding up all right. Marina and Nolan stayed married, but their first year began with a crack through it. Margot Pierce never made a scene. She did not need to. Her distance said everything. Vivian lost money, but money was not what frightened her most. She lost control of the story, and in Charleston, that was the part people remembered. Evan went back to work as if a suit and a calendar could save him. For a while, he tried. Regional sales calls, client renewals, territory reports. But shame follows people into conference rooms. He missed deadlines. He stepped out of meetings to call banks, vendors, lawyers. His credit score slid because his own cards had already been carrying more than I knew. A few months later, the medical equipment company let him go. Carter Wynn, an old friend, found him part-time work as a waiter at a midtown hotel. That was not one dramatic fall. It was a staircase. Debt, embarrassment, lost trust, lost income, and finally the absence of the woman who had quietly made his life function. While he was learning how heavy a serving tray could feel, I was learning Rome. I landed at Fiumicino with one suitcase, swollen eyes, and a silence inside me that did not feel peaceful yet. I rented a small studio in Trastevere, with a narrow balcony and a washing machine I did not know how to use at first. I bought groceries badly the first time. I ordered coffee too slowly. I got lost near Via del Corso and laughed for the first time in days because no one there knew I was supposed to be embarrassed. Rome did not heal me overnight. No city can do that. But Rome gave me rooms where Vivian's voice did not echo. I bought a camel coat Evan once would have called too expensive. I stood on Pincian Hill and looked down at Piazza del Popolo while the sky turned gold, and for once, nobody needed me to be smaller so they could feel tall. That was where I met Luca Ferri, a local guide I had hired for a walking tour, and later kept talking to about routes, permits, small hotels, safety, women traveling alone. He did not know it then, but he became the first Roman thread in what would become my new life. By April of 2026, I was back in New York with a small LLC, a careful budget, and a name: Free Spirit Journeys. Empowering women, one trip at a time. It did not appear from nowhere, and it did not become an empire overnight. I had spent 10 years building itineraries, negotiating hotel contracts, solving travel emergencies, and keeping people safe in unfamiliar cities. The only difference was that now I was doing it for women who needed more than a vacation. Women after divorce. Women after burnout. Women after grief. Women after families that had taught them to disappear. Priya Nand, the assistant coordinator I had mentored at North Atlantic retreats, became my first part-time employee. Luca became my Rome partner. Tamsin reviewed vendor paperwork when she had time and reminded me not to undercharge just because my mission was personal. That same spring, Free Spirit Journeys held its first small launch event at a midtown hotel. Piper Ross, a travel journalist, came to interview me. Bethany Cole, the banquet manager, walked me through the event space. The room filled with women, vendors, bloggers, and a few former clients who had taken my first trial itinerary to Rome and come back standing differently. I did not know Evan was working there until I saw him holding a tray near the service entrance. For 1 second, the room narrowed. He looked thinner. older. His white shirt did not fit quite right at the collar. He saw the sign near the entrance at the same time I saw him, Sloane Merritt, founder, Free Spirit Journeys. A woman beside me was telling Piper that the Rome trip had helped her sign divorce papers after 20 years of feeling invisible. Piper turned to me and asked, "What made you start this company?" I could have said his name. I did not. I realized I had become the operations manager for everyone else's life, I said. And I had forgotten to build a way out for myself. That was when Evan stumbled. The tray tilted. Glasses hit the floor and shattered across the hotel carpet. The room turned. Bethany moved quickly, professional and calm. Even looked at me and whispered, "Sloane, please." I felt nothing sharp. No rage. No longing. No need to punish him. I looked at him the way you look at an old address you no longer live at. Then I gave a small nod and turned back to Piper. "I'm sorry," I said. "Where were we?" That was the moment I knew I was free. Not when I boarded the plane. Not when I signed the divorce papers. Not when his card declined. I was free when he could stand in front of me broken. And I no longer felt responsible for putting him back together. By the fall of 2027, I was back in Rome, leading a group of women from 35 to 62 through the same streets where I had first learned to breathe again. One of them, Sarah Keene, 41 and newly divorced, stood beside me on Pinchin Hill and asked, "Is it normal to feel scared and free at the same time?" I looked out over Piazza del Popolo, the city wide and bright below us. "Yes," I told her. "The first step isn't revenge. It's leaving the place that made you small." Priya texted from New York to say our spring tour had sold out. Luca waited near the steps, checking the timing for dinner. The women gathered behind me, laughing softly, adjusting scarves, taking pictures of a horizon that belonged to nobody and everyone. I thought of the receipt. Vivian's smile. Evan's silence. $14.82. My ring on the dresser. The memories were still mine, but they no longer held me. I did not come back to be seen by the Calders. I left so I could finally see myself. Was I too cold, or did Evan and his family finally get exactly what they earned? Tell me what you would have done in my place, and if this story stayed with you, stay with us for the next one.